Today we're going to continue to look at Marine Corps weapons in the game Squad from the perspective of a prior service Marine. I was an armor in the Marine Corps, and I worked on a lot of these weapons, and so I know a lot about them. I have a lot of hands-on experience, and I've even shot some of these weapons. Uh, and today we're going to look at the M27 IAR, the Infantry Automatic Rifle. Um, the IAR is a really interesting weapon because the purpose of it originally was to replace the M249 SAW. So I think around 2010, the Marine Corps adopted the M27 IAR with the intent to replace the SAW, the M249. So this gun was entering service around the time that I joined the Marine Corps. And so when I got to first see this gun in the schoolhouse, the armor schoolhouse, this was a pretty much brand new weapon. Now, the Marine Corps at the time was very unhappy with the M249 SAW. Pretty much everybody I talked to who used the weapon didn't like it. It had a very poor reputation in the Marine Corps because it was inaccurate and it was unreliable. Now, I don't think these issues are really due to the design of the weapon itself. I think the reason why it has that reputation in the Marine Corps is because most of our SAWs are very old weapons. Most of those guns were made, 20 or 30 years prior, and they've been used a lot, So a lot of issues that people were having were the inaccuracies, and the unreliability was due to the receivers basically falling apart. The way the SAW, and I'll get into this more when we talk about the SAW, but the SAW is basically made out of a receiver that's riveted together, and then after, these guns probably have 100 or 200,000 rounds through them, and the rivets are falling apart. And because everything is all loose and stuff, things malfunction, and the barrels don't lock in very well, so they become very inaccurate. It's because the guns are very old. And so, as a result, the M27 came about. The M27 was designed, it was marketed to be a very accurate, fully automatic weapon, an automatic rifle to replace the M249 in the squad support role. And the way it was issued initially was with this bipod. I believe it's a Harris bipod, which is kind of inappropriate for a squad automatic weapon. It's really more of kind of like a precision rifle bipod, but it was issued with the bipod, and the guy carrying it would have a bunch of magazines and just lay down suppressing fire. There was a lot of suspicion about it because, how could a magazine-fed rifle possibly provide as much firepower as a belt-fed M249? But apparently, Marines really liked it because, one thing I heard was, because it's so much more accurate than the SAW, its suppressing fire is more effective because you actually can hit people at range with the suppressing fire. So even though you have fewer rounds in the magazine, you have to reload more often. Actually hitting people makes up for that. The SAW really had atrocious accuracy. At least the SAWs the Marine Corps were using at the time had atrocious accuracy. I think the weapon by itself is probably a pretty good weapon. But yeah, so the M27 kind of looks like an M4 or an M16. Same kind of profile. It is a totally different gun. Let's go into the 3D viewer and kind of get a closer look at it. So M27, the 3D model here doesn't have the optic or anything on it, but M27 right here. On the outside, it kind of looks like an M16 or M4. It is a completely different gun, though. M16 or M4 is a internal gas piston gun. So people call it direct impingement. It's not actually. It's actually internal gas. I'm not going to get into the details of that, but basically the gas is tapped up here, it's poured it through a gas tube, and then it's actually deposited into the bolt carrier group, where the inside of the bolt carrier group is the piston, and that's what drives it. The M27 is based off of the HK416 type weapon, so the Heckler and Koch weapon. It's an external piston gun. So the way that it works is you have a gas system up here, the gas port, and the piston is actually here above the barrel. So there's actually a piston rod right here, and the gas port drives that piston rod. The piston rod taps the top of the bolt carrier, and that's what sends the bolt carrier back. So it's an external piston gun, kind of like the AR-18. So it's really not an AR-15 derived gun. It's more of an AR-18 derived gun. The benefits of the external piston are that it's generating less heat here in the bolt carrier group area. I remember 20 years ago or so watching Future Weapons when I think it was with the 416 at the time. He was shooting the external piston 416. I think this might have been when the SCAR program was going on. And he was talking about how cool the bolt carrier is after shooting a magazine through it, whereas a normal M4, the bolt carrier is too hot. This gun must be so reliable. The bolt carrier getting hot with an internal piston gun itself doesn't reduce reliability. And then, of course, there's the whole kind of theory about, the gun shits where it eats. It's depositing carbon deposits here in the bolt carrier and all of that. None of that stuff's really important, to be honest, with internal piston. The only benefit to not having the internal piston in the bolt carrier is that it keeps the bolt carrier cool, which helps keep the gun lubed for a longer time. The only problem with the M4 and M16 having internal piston is that when the bolt carrier gets kind of hot, whatever lube you have on there, which in the military is going to be CLP, so it's that really lightweight oil, it's going to burn off. And so your bolt's going to run dry after a few magazines. And so what you do, with the external piston, you don't have that issue. Now, of course, with the M4, that's really not an issue because your bolt runs dry. Whenever you get a chance, you just crack the action open and drip a couple drops of CLP in there. It's not a big deal if your bolt runs dry. You got CLP on you. Just drip some CLP in there every couple hundred rounds and you're good to go. But external piston is probably a little better for full auto fire, which this at least was intended for full auto, a lot of full auto and everything like that. It's got a heavier profile barrel than the normal government profile barrel M4. Of course, I'll talk about the M4 profile barrel when we get to the M4. But yeah, so it's external piston. So it's basically HK416 that was modified for the Marine Corps' needs. So we'll kind of go from the back to the front. So the back right here, this stock, basically it's an HK416 style stock. Right here, it's got this nice kind of soft butt pad here. It's actually a pretty nice stock, although from what I've heard, apparently these stocks, early on broke a lot. I think there's actually a improved variant of this stock, so I'm not sure if the stock that's depicted here is the early model or the late model stock. But I know that TFB TV actually did a really interesting thing many years ago about the M27 by a prior service Marine who actually used it. But yeah, so you have the stock right here, same kind of basic, M4 style buffer tube right here. So I'll take squad's word for it with the accuracy of this stock and the buffer tube. I don't know if they use like a special HK buffer tube or if it's different or anything like that. Right here, the castle nut, I can already tell you the castle nut is wrong. The castle nut, oh, actually, no, I'm sorry. The castle nut isn't wrong. It's the right direction for the castle nut. You have it, in the right direction. Those are the wrench holes right there. I don't recall seeing this hole right here in the castle nut when I was in, but it's possible it could have been there. My memory on the M27 is just a little bit fuzzy because I got out of the Marine Corps years ago, and that was the last time I've really seen or handled an M27. So, unlike, some of these other guns like M16s and M4s and stuff like that, I haven't really messed with M27 since I was in the Marine Corps. Typical HK style pistol grip, HK style lower receiver. Now, what I was talking about with the M16, the thickness in the back of the lower receiver, that's what it should have looked like. The HK lower receiver is not the same as a M16 lower receiver. It's a different profile, but this thickness back here is what the M16A2 thickness should look like on the M16A4. So at least this section back here, it should be this thick. You shouldn't be able to see that detent channel. Selector switch, I do believe the M27s had an ambidextrous selector switch. so it would be on both sides. I don't recall if the selector switch on the right side was shorter than the other, um, because it does kind of get in the way with a right-handed shooter. So usually you'd have like a kind of truncated selector switch on the right side. But I do believe it was ambidextrous. HK style pistol grip. Looks the lower receiver looks correct to me. Um, you have the three holes right here. That's the auto sear hole, um, the trigger pin hole, and the hammer pin hole. You have the magazine release here too. You have the magazine fencing, A2 style magazine fencing. Now the magazine well right here. This right here is it's a typical. It's an HK style magazine well. So if you remember the M16, the magazine well is kind of up at an angle a little bit more. The HK kind of uses a flat magazine well, like a horizontal magazine well like this. I don't know why they do that, but this is, I believe this is the same profile magazine well that the British L85 is. And this actually presents problems. It makes it difficult, or actually makes it impossible to use like Magpul magazines, like the PMags, the Gen 1 and Gen 2 PMags. And now I believe the Gen 3 PMags can fit in there. Because by the time Gen 3 came out, dudes were using 416s and M27s and stuff. But the earlier PMags will actually not fit in here. It will take normal NATO Stanag magazines. The magazine that appears to be in here is an HK magazine, HK steel magazine. HK magazines are black, whereas the normal GI NATO magazines are gray. So the fact that this is black seems to indicate that it's HK magazine. I'll take their word for it. I still don't really know what the bottom here. It doesn't look like a normal magazine, but it could be how maybe that's what the HK magazine bottom's supposed to look like. I'm not entirely sure. Of course, you have the markings right here, Schmeckler and Koch, made in Germany. So, obviously for, legal reasons, I'm sure they just, put a fake name here, Schmeckler and Koch. So that's pretty clever right there. Schmeckler and Koch, GmbH. The German companies are GmbH. I don't really know what that means. M27, Cal 556. I'm assuming the markings here are correct. I don't really recall the markings on the M27. I wasn't really looking at them too closely. I do know that this is typical HK right here, having the fire selector kind of, what would these be? Like pictograms or whatever right here, like the bullet. So the white crossed out bullet is safe. One bullet is semi, and then I guess you would have 30, for full auto. I know like on the MP5s and stuff, the full auto would be several bullets pictured. So yeah, I mean, this looks right to me. Again, I don't remember exactly what the markings would be, but it certainly looks good. It looks really good. And I'm guessing this would be like a serial number. I don't recall if the serial numbers were on here or on the magazine well. So again, I'm going to have to take their word for it. I also don't recall if the upper receivers were serialized. Because on M16s and M4s, we don't serialize the uppers. Upper receiver looks good too. Yeah, typical 416. It's got this kind of weird, tall upper receiver. And I do believe, this is the HK charging handle. So I believe we also had the HK charging handles in a normal kind of A2 style forward assist. The bolt, this is actually a correct bolt right here. So an M16 M4 bolt would have the vent holes in here because it's an internal piston. So it would have the vent holes to vent out the excess gas. There's no gas going into the bolt on an external piston gun, so it's just solid. So that is actually an appropriate bolt. And of course, you have the ridges here for the forward assist to push up against. And this hole right here, that's the firing pin retainer hole. That's the little pin that retains the firing pin. And yeah, it's got this kind of weird, tall upper receiver. The sight on here, on the M16A4 video, I was talking about that CAC, that Knight's Arm rear sight. That's what that is, this CAC sight right here. The Marine Corps uses the CAC sight. It would say USMC on the front of the sight, which isn't on, or I think right here, it would normally say USMC. So I think that is incorrect. They've failed to put that on here in the game, so my immersion's already ruined. Um, Again, I'm going over this, with extremely fine tooth comb. So I mean, they're doing a great job at portraying the detail on this. One thing about the 416, the upper receiver is monolithic. So that means that well, it's not truly monolithic, because I think monolithic would actually mean that the upper receiver and the handguard are connected, like they're one piece. The handguard is a separate piece, but they're aligned up here. So there's no gap. On the M16 and M4, the handguard would be a little bit lower and there would be a gap here. Here, there is no gap. It's just continuous rail, which is nice. It's nice. Technically, you're not supposed to bridge optics, but you can bridge optics, with this gap here. So that is possible. Technically, it's not allowed. Now, nice thing about this handguard here, the HK handguard, is that it's quick detach. So this, if I remember, it's like a pin. I think this is a pin, or I guess it's a screw. You basically just pull this out, and the handguard just slides off, so you can access the barrel and you can access the gas system, which is necessary in an external piston gun, because now you have a piston up here that needs to be maintained. The nice thing about an internal piston AR-15 is the gas system requires absolutely zero maintenance. There's no maintenance that needs to be done on the gas tube or the gas key on the bolt carrier or anything like that. Absolutely zero maintenance. The only time you ever need to mess with a gas tube is if it broke and you need to replace it, which would almost never happen. But here, because you have to maintain as part of your field stripping, that's in your TAC 10 manual, right? The operator's manual for the gun. The infantryman field strips his gun and cleans it. You have to take this handguard off in order to access your gas tube. So that is the thing. It's a nice thing that the handguard is quick remove. I'm assuming that it does a good enough job at retaining zero, because of course with the handguard you're going to have your lamp mounted on the handguard. So here again we have the PEX 16. Like I said, in M16A4, I personally never saw a PEX 16. I know they were around. And of course, in this game you're playing as an infantryman, so these guys would all have the PEX 16s, I would guess. So yeah, PEX 16 or PEX 15, whatever it is. This has to maintain zero. That's why the rails on these military guns are usually so thick compared to these skinny little skimpy rails you see on civilian AR-15s. It's because you need to maintain zero. Well, this is a removable handguard, so I'm assuming the zero is good enough to put it back on. Usually you zero these things at 100 or 200 meters, so if it roughly keeps zero, that's good enough for government work. But I know that I personally would kind of cringe at having a removable handguard, especially in the military, because these guys are taking this thing on and off every day, because you're cleaning your weapon every single day. At least when you're in garrison on the range and stuff. So yeah, that's the rail. A big, thick, heavy rail. It's a thick profile barrel. It's a 16-inch long barrel. So the M16 is a 20-inch barrel. The M4 is 14.5 inches. This barrel is 16 inches. And I do believe that it did have a normal A2 style flash hider at the end. Now, one requirement the Marine Corps had for the M27 was a bayonet lug. So you have a bayonet lug here at the end, so you can put the bayonet. The 416 that this is based on doesn't have a bayonet lug, because it's a modern rifle. Most militaries and military users don't require a bayonet anymore, but we like our bayonets in the Marine Corps, so we made sure that this was a requirement. Flip up sight here in the front, obviously it'd be flipped down when you have an optic on, the way it is right now. There's a low profile gas block, and I do believe the M27 gas block is not adjustable, if I remember correctly. So this is the correct low profile gas block, non-adjustable. The 416, I think, usually has an adjustable, at least the 416A5. I'm not sure about the 416D, but this is based off the 416D. But the 416A5, I believe, has an adjustable gas block. Now, one thing that the Marine Corps has started using in recent years was actually a short-barreled variant of the M27, and it's called the M27 Recon Weapons Kit. And it's basically the M27, but instead of a 16-inch barrel, it has I believe it's a 10.5 inch barrel. So it's kind of looks like a Mark 18 style weapon, like a Mark 18 Mod 1. And that, I believe, has an adjustable, it's based off the HK 416A5, which has the adjustable gas block. And the Recon Weapons Kit 416s, I believe it's Recon Marines primarily who use those, and I imagine also SOF Marines, like MARSOC, SOCOM, MARSOC Marines. Um, I've seen videos of, I guess like the fast teams, like the embassy guards and whatnot, using those. That's not in this game. It wouldn't really fit in this game because that's really kind of a special, like an SOF weapon. In this game, you're playing as a normal, infantry fleet marine. Like a marine that's off of a MEU or something like that. MAGTAF kind of thing. So yeah. So I wouldn't expect to see that in a game like this. But yeah, M27. This seems like a really good rendition of the M27. So let's kind of look at how it's portrayed right here in gameplay. So the optic that we have on here is the SDO. So the Trigicon, it's an ACOG. It's a Trigicon ACOG. The one on the M16 M4 is the RCO, the rifle combat optic. This is the SDO, the squad day optic, and this is the kind of machine gun oriented ACOG right here. I believe it's still 4 power, but it has a reticle that's optimized for use on a machine gun. Now, I believe this was originally intended for the M249 SAW because the PIP saws that we use in the modern day, they have a 16-inch barrel, so that works perfectly here for this 16-inch barrel M27. It's got this horseshoe reticle. Works the same way as an ACOG, so it glows in the dark with the tritium, and it also has the fiber optic on here. And it looks like they actually put the tape on the fiber optic, so it looks like he has some duct tape on his fiber optic here because that doesn't really look like tape. It might just be blue for some reason. It's a red fiber optic, so it looks just like an ACOG fiber optic on the outside. But he has some duct tape or something on it. So this one looks like it's taped up. But yeah, it's a machine gun kind of oriented reticle right here. And yeah, the SDOs that I saw, I think they pretty much all have these quick detach levers right here, whereas a lot of the RCOs have the knobs. Right here, that's that rear sight right there that he's got folded down. So this is the M27 pretty much in the configuration that I would have saw them in when I was in the Marine Corps. Now I know that you can see M27s in all kinds of other configurations. You'll see them with RCOs on them. You'll see some units, whatever Marine Corps units have access to EOTechs and some aim points and stuff like that. EOTechs and aim points really aren't common in the Marine Corps, but you sometimes see them on M27s. Now, interestingly, in recent years, the M27 is replacing the M4. So when I was in the Marine Corps, the M4 was really replacing the M16A4 for infantry Marines, at least. All of us POGs and reservists still use the M16 a lot, but a few years ago, they decided to not just replace the M249 with the M27, but also the M4. And so the M27 is now basically the standard service rifle of the Marine Corps. And now one thing that's missing here is normally the M27 with the SDO, normally there was a red dot on top of the SDO, a Trigicon RMR. Red dot, and actually you could kind of see the mounting brackets right here. There's no mouse cursor, but if you look at the back of behind these screws, there's that horizontal plate with a hole in it. That's the mounting bracket for the RMR. And so I almost always saw an RMR, piggyback RMR on top of here, and that's really nice because you can use that with close quarters, and then you can use the scope at longer range. Now, I suspect it's not in the game because they don't really do multiple optics on a gun in this game. I know there's mods that do that, but it's not really, they don't do that in this game. It'd be cool if they actually had that because that would make this gun a beast at close quarters and at medium to long range. We got the bipod here. It's a Harris bipod. This is not a machine gun bipod. A Harris bipod is really meant for like your M110s, like your sniper rifles and all of that. So it's kind of weird that they put it on something that's supposed to be a machine gun. And from what I heard, it's not. It's because I mean, with a machine gun, you're going to want to be able to throw that thing down on the ground, and misuse it. The Harris bipod is not designed to be misused like that. You know, so apparently these things broke a lot. Which understandably, because it's not what this bipod's designed to do. But that's what we have right here on here, and of course, it looks like a good rendition of a Harris bipod. So yeah, I mean, you can use it full auto. You can see how accurate it is on full auto. If only I were more accurate. And then of course, bolt locks back. He hits the bolt catch right there. So yeah. And of course, you got semi-automatic, and this thing's a beast on semi-automatic too. Everybody who I talked to who shot this thing loves it. All the infantry guys, they love these guns because these guns are just so accurate. These actually are really good barrels. The thing about the H&K barrels is that they're very high quality barrels. And of course, unlike a lot of our M4s and M16s, which have a lot of rounds through them, these guns, especially back in the day, were brand new. So I mean, these virgin barrels were shooting super tight groups. Dudes just really love how accurate the M27 is. But yeah, pretty much that's the M27 from how I understand it and my experience. I don't really have a whole lot of experience with this gun. I shot it a little bit in the Marine Corps, and I messed around with some HK 416 type rifles and stuff, in the civilian world. But I don't have a whole lot of experience with this gun. But I mean, for what I've heard, everybody loves this gun. It's really not surprising that the Marine Corps ended up replacing the M4 with this gun. So yeah, that's it for this one.